Hello and welcome back to the second episode of the Just Connect English podcast. If you haven't listened to the first episode yet, I recommend you start with that one, as it explains in more detail the purpose of this podcast. In the previous podcast, I talked about languages and Stephen Krashen's theory for learning languages. There was an aspect of Krashen's theory that I told you was very important. Do you remember what it was? Well, my main advice was to look for interesting things to read, watch, or listen to in English. I told you that while I think grammar is still important, you should concentrate on comprehension. If every day you try to understand something in English, a text, a video, or the lyrics of a song, you are going to make enormous progress. And in order to stay motivated, you should search for things that interest you and that you want to understand. If you hate sports, for example, there's no point searching for a YouTube video on the history of basketball because you will lose concentration very quickly. With this podcast, I'm going to try to talk about a wide variety of subjects that interest me. I know that not everyone is going to be interested in the topic of every podcast, but I hope to cover enough that there's something that interests everyone. The transcripts for each podcast are also available on my website, justconnectenglish.com, and you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, where I post new content most days of the week. You will find me if you search Just Connect English on Instagram or TikTok. Today I am going to talk about a new form of currency or money called Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been around for a few years now, but for many people, it still sounds like something from another planet, as it seems very different from what we are used to using as currency, such as euros and dollars. It's something that, like many other people, I have heard a lot about in the media over the last few years, but which I didn't really understand. I couldn't really say what a Bitcoin was or how it worked. I just knew that everyone who was talking about Bitcoin claimed that it was going to change the world. You might be thinking that Bitcoin is quite a technical or complex subject to understand in English, but don't worry. As I said in the first podcast, I'm going to explain these complicated things in a simple, easy to understand way. Also, there will be a short story near the end of the podcast, which I think highlights how quickly Bitcoin has gone from something nobody knew about to what some people call revolutionary and one of the consequences of its rapid growth. If you have heard people talking about Bitcoin before now, it's probably because they're talking about the price that it's being sold at on the stock exchange, which on the date I am recording this, the 21st of April 2021, is over $55,000. The exact price is $56,187,000. This means that if you want to buy one Bitcoin, you have to pay $56,187. Maybe you have heard people talking on the internet who say that you can become rich by buying Bitcoin. However, the problem for many people is that they often don't know much more about Bitcoin than the basic details. They don't really understand what it is. So today, we are going to try to understand it together, and by the end of the podcast, I hope that you will know enough about Bitcoin to form your own opinion. As I mentioned in the first podcast, you might need to listen more than once to fully understand what I'm talking about, so don't worry if you get lost. It's all part of the process of learning a language. And for anyone who thinks this is a little too easy, congratulations to you. You're doing well. But also, you can increase the speed of the podcast. This makes it more challenging and is actually something that I do when listening to some podcasts in French or Spanish. To start, we're going to ask, what is Bitcoin and how does it work? So, Bitcoin is a virtual currency, also known as a cryptocurrency, which means that it only exists on the internet. You can't take a Bitcoin out of the bank, hold it in your hand, and put it in your wallet. You can only see it on a computer screen. It was created in 2009, but no one knows who created it. The name Satoshi Nakamoto is connected with creating Bitcoin, but most people believe that this is the pseudonym of the person or group of people who created Bitcoin. A pseudonym is a fake or false name that a person or group of people might use for a number of reasons. In this situation, it seems that the creator or creators of Bitcoin wish to remain anonymous. So as I said, Bitcoin is a virtual currency. This means that there is no physical money like the notes and coins of currencies such as euros and dollars, and there is also no Bitcoin credit card. In most stores, you can only pay in cash or with your credit card, but you can't pay in Bitcoins. Something interesting about Bitcoin is the fact that it is a currency that does not depend on a central institution. This makes it different from euros, which are guaranteed by the European Central Bank, and US dollars, which are guaranteed by the Fed, the Central Bank of the United States. These are the institutions that guarantee the value of their currency. You know that if you have euros, you can use them because they have a value which is linked to the European economy and which is guaranteed by the European Central Bank. However, the value of Bitcoins is not guaranteed by anyone or anything. That's why it changes so quickly, as I'm sure you have seen on the news. Every few months, there is media attention when Bitcoin goes up or down by a large amount. The price of Bitcoin depends only on supply and demand, who sells Bitcoin and who wants to buy it. To better understand this, we can use one of the most popular board games in the world as an example. Monopoly is a board game where you have to buy different kinds of properties, such as houses and hotels, to become rich and defeat the other players. So in Monopoly there is money, but it isn't real money. If you take the money from the game and try to go shopping, you won't find any shops where they will accept this fake currency instead of the legal currency used in your country. So while you unfortunately can't use it in the supermarket, Monopoly money has value when you are playing the game, as the players recognize that it has value when buying and selling their properties. Well, with Bitcoins, it's the same. Bitcoin has value that is recognized by the people who use it. And like Monopoly money, the number of Bitcoins is limited. There is no more Monopoly money than the amount included in the box when you buy the game, so you can't just make more when you spend all your money. Maybe Monopoly was the inspiration for the creator of the Bitcoins, as they decided at the time of creation that there would be no more than 21 million Bitcoins. At the moment, over 18.5 million are available, and although not all of them have been created yet, we already know that the limit will be 21 million and no more than that. In the beginning, when Bitcoin was created in January 2009, it was worth 0.001 cents. But on the 13th of April 2021, Bitcoin reached its highest ever price of $63,588.20. I mentioned the current price of Bitcoin earlier in the podcast. Do you remember? At the moment, it is $56,187. This means that in about a week, the value of Bitcoin has fallen by almost $7,500. This means that if you had 1 Bitcoin last Tuesday, it is 11.63% less valuable today. There will be many people who will say that this isn't the problem, that the price will go back up soon, and they might be right. But as far as I can see, no one really knows why the price of Bitcoin goes up and down by so much. So if you hear this and decide that you still want to buy Bitcoin, how does it work? There are several ways to acquire Bitcoin. The first is to download software to your computer or smartphone that will allow you to buy it. But you can also go through a platform on a website. By doing this, you will get a digital wallet, and in this wallet, you will be able to buy and keep your Bitcoins. Your wallet has a unique code. This code is very important because if you lose it, you will lose your Bitcoins forever. As we will see later in the podcast, losing or forgetting the code has caused problems for many people. When you get this wallet and the code to access it, you join the Bitcoin network. In other words, you become a link in the Bitcoin chain. In fact, each user of this currency plays the role of client and server. This is called a peer-to-peer network. Maybe you are familiar with this system with downloads because there are peer-to-peer platforms for downloading movies. Thanks to these platforms, data is shared on the computers of several people, and these computers form a network. So, it's the same with Bitcoin. Since all users form a chain, they constitute the network that allows Bitcoin to be exchanged. Behind this, there is a technology called blockchain. Blockchain is like a history where all Bitcoin transactions are recorded. This way, users always know who owns Bitcoins, who used to own those Bitcoins, and how many are available. I don't have enough time to say much more about blockchain, but I will add a link in the episode description to a very useful short video which explains blockchain. There are also special users called miners who are responsible for monitoring all transactions and validating them. So for a Bitcoin transaction to be accepted, it must be validated by miners on the network. This is what guarantees its safety. And these people, these miners, also have the ability to produce new Bitcoins, which is called mining. At first, this was quite easy to do, as there were millions of Bitcoins available. However, now that the majority of Bitcoins have been mined, it is much more complicated because you need extremely powerful computers to mine the remaining Bitcoins. I presume that most people listening to this have a simple computer or laptop like mine, which means that you probably cannot mine new Bitcoins yourself. You have to have several computers with enormous computing power, and that also consumes a lot of energy, which is very expensive. So for the majority of people, it is not profitable to produce Bitcoin. Okay, I think you understand what Bitcoin is and how it works now. So now we are going to talk about why there are so many people who are interested in this currency. What are the advantages of Bitcoin, but also the disadvantages? Bitcoin is a revolutionary currency, and it has many advantages for the people who use it. The first is its security and reliability. The reliability of Bitcoin is linked to its structure, and it is the users of the currency themselves who guarantee its safety. That's why it's impossible to make Bitcoins. If you wanted to do this, you would have to change the transaction history on all users' computers at the same time. And since there are 3 million users of Bitcoin in the world, you can imagine how difficult that would be. The second advantage of Bitcoin is that it is an independent currency. As I mentioned before, traditional physical currencies depend on financial institutions, most often central banks. It is the central bank of a country that guarantees the value of the currency. But in some countries, states are not able to guarantee this value. For example, if there is a lot of inflation and the economy is very unstable, the currency loses value enormously. So citizens of financially unstable countries prefer to buy foreign currencies whose value is more stable, such as dollars or euros. Since Bitcoin is not dependent on a state or any institutions like central banks, it does not have this kind of risk. But as you know, its price changes very quickly, so that is not a good solution if you are looking for a stable value. Another advantage of Bitcoin for many people is that it protects the anonymity of its users. When you create a wallet and make Bitcoin transactions, you do not need to provide your identity. This is why in the beginning, Bitcoin was very popular for trafficking and criminal networks, for buying and selling illegal things like drugs, weapons, etc. But the problem is, when you want to exchange your Bitcoin for cash, then you need to give your personal information. So in fact, it's impossible to hide yourself completely to protect your anonymity 100%. This is why now many drug dealers and criminals no longer use Bitcoin for their transactions. Bitcoin has become so popular over the last few years, mainly because its value keeps increasing. There are a lot of people who see the price of Bitcoin going up, and they think that by buying Bitcoin, they are going to be able to make a lot of money quickly and easily. However, now I'm going to explain to you why I think buying Bitcoin is not a good investment. The main problem with Bitcoin is its instability. In fact, there are no clear rules. There is no legal framework to guarantee their value. As this is a very recent invention, there is nothing that protects its users. So often people who buy it do it just to speculate, which means that most people buying Bitcoin are hoping to make a financial gain while understanding that they risk losing their money. In fact, the vast majority of economists believe that Bitcoin is not a currency, that it is simply a tool for speculation. There are even states, including China, which have decided to ban it. In my opinion, Bitcoin has the potential to be a currency like the euro or the dollar, but until a significant number of people start using it to buy and sell things day to day, like they would with any other currency that's legal in their country, then it's difficult to argue with the people who say that it is just a tool for speculation, especially when its value can be so volatile. In fact, there are more and more obstacles to the use of Bitcoin. Since now there are a lot of transactions, the system has become more difficult to manage. More and more miners are needed to validate and record more and more Bitcoin transactions. It has become very problematic, and it also consumes a lot of energy. Analysis by the University of Cambridge suggests that if Bitcoin was a country, then it would be in the top 30 of the highest energy users in the world. Its electricity consumption of 121.36 terawatts hours per year places it above Argentina, the Netherlands, and the United Arab Emirates, and just behind countries like Ukraine, Sweden, and Malaysia. For me, this is the main reason why I think Bitcoin is going to have more of a negative impact than a positive one. You could argue how economically useful or useless, depending on your opinion, Bitcoin is. But either way, the impact it has on the environment is massive. A US Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources said that Bitcoin was found to be responsible for 1% of all the energy used on Earth in 2018. In return for this, I think that there should be a better outcome, or at least an indication of how this technology can have a positive impact on the world, especially since the complexity of the math problems required to mine the Bitcoin is growing. This means that the processing power of the computers and the energy consumption are also growing. If Bitcoin, or another form of cryptocurrency which also uses the blockchain, becomes part of our daily lives in the future, then perhaps it will improve our lives. I'm not close-minded to the possibilities of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, or the blockchain, and if anyone can offer me a way that it can be a positive thing, then I'm willing to listen. However, at the moment, the amount of energy that Bitcoin requires outweighs any of the positives or benefits that I've heard so far. I mentioned earlier that when the media talks about Bitcoin, it's because the price has either gone way up or way down, but there are also many stories of people losing computers or forgetting passwords, and instead of making a lot of money, they can't actually access their Bitcoin anymore. The New York Times reports that about 20% of all Bitcoins in existence are in lost or inaccessible digital wallets. All of these unavailable Bitcoins are worth about $140 billion. In the next part of this podcast, I would like to recount the story of someone who lost access to the Bitcoin which they had received when it was much cheaper and almost no one imagined that it would become so valuable. At some point, most people forget a password to an email address or social media account. It happens to me too often. Luckily, most websites are aware that people have problems with passwords and include a "Did you forget your password?" option. If you can confirm that the account is yours, for example by answering a question such as "What is your mother's maiden name?" then everything is okay and you have access to your account again. But imagine if you have a very important account and you forget the password, but there is no option to help you access it. It's a real nightmare because there is nothing that you can do. If it's just an old email address that you used to use years ago, most people wouldn't be too worried. But imagine if this forgotten password means that you lose access to hundreds of millions of dollars. This is what happened to Stefan Thomas. Stefan Thomas is a German programmer who currently lives in San Francisco and has 2 guesses left to figure out a password that is worth about $220 million. It turns out that in 2011, Stefan made an animated video called "What is Bitcoin?", which introduced a lot of people to the technology. As a reward for his work on the video, an early Bitcoin fanatic gave Stefan 7,002 Bitcoins. As Stefan was concerned about losing his Bitcoin, he wrote down a long string of letters, numbers, and symbols to use as a password for the digital wallet holding the Bitcoin. Unfortunately, in the same year he received the Bitcoins, he lost the piece of paper he wrote this password down on. In the years since then, the value of his Bitcoins has soared from almost nothing to being worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This password would let him unlock a small hard drive called an iron key. However, this hard drive only gives users 10 guesses. If Stefan doesn't enter the correct password after 10 attempts, then the hard drive makes it impossible for anyone to ever access its contents. So Stefan has tried 8 times but each guess has failed so far. I would just lay in bed and think about it, Stefan told the New York Times. Then I would go to the computer with some new strategy, and it wouldn't work, and I would be desperate again. For a long time, Stefan suffered sleepless nights as he watched Bitcoin's rise and rise. He became so obsessed with remembering the password that it started to affect his mental health. There are various companies which have been helping people who have lost the passwords to their digital wallets, but no one has been able to help Stefan yet. In the end, Stefan decided to put the hard drive in a secret, secure facility in case someone discovers a new way of cracking his complex password and gives him access to his bitcoins. For the moment, he says that keeping it far away helps him try not to think about the password and all the money waiting for him if he can remember the password that he lost in 2011. I got to the point where I said to myself, let it be in the past, just for your own mental health, he added. The good news for Stefan in this situation, financially speaking, is that he has made enormous gains from investing in other cryptocurrencies. So if you were worried he would end up with nothing, he already has more money than he knows what to do with. The most significant change for Stefan has been a change of opinion on Bitcoin. Initially, he was attracted to Bitcoin because it was outside the control of a country or company, but now he isn't so sure that people should be their own bank and hold their own money. This whole idea of being your own bank, let me put it this way, do you make your own shoes? Stefan said. The reason we have banks is that we don't want to deal with all those things that banks do. Is this an opinion that more people will have about Bitcoin in the future? Or will it continue to be as attractive to people as it was to Stefan in 2011? I don't know, but I am sure that either way, Bitcoin, or at least cryptocurrencies and the blockchain, are going to be around for a long time. Anyway, thank you for listening to me. I hope that these first 2 podcasts have helped you make some progress with your level of English, and I would really appreciate it if you could give this podcast 5 stars and leave a nice comment on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps the podcast to grow. If you or someone you know is looking for English classes, then you can book a class with me through my website, justconnectenglish.com, where you will also find the transcripts for these podcasts. I am also active on Instagram and TikTok. If you search Just Connect English, then you will find me. I'll be back next week with another podcast, so have a great week, and I'll see you soon.